uh, get them located over here.
Okay. Well, welcome everyone. As we're starting to pull people into the meeting, this is the State Building Code Council IBC Technical Advisory Group for January 22nd, 2026. Dustin, do you want to give you a chance to bring people in, or should we start roll?
Well, so far there's nobody. There's two people over there in the attendees column, and they're not panelists. So we've got everybody here at the moment, and it looks like we're light on attendance at the moment. So we can go ahead and do a roll call, start talking, and we'll see where we get today. But just letting everybody know that the meeting is scheduled to go till 1:55 to give a small window to transition to the legislative committee meeting this afternoon.
Okay, well, let's do our best we can here. Let's take roll, please, then.
All righty, Todd Byerthur,
Here.
Roger Haringa, not seen online. Joe Mayo, not seeing. Che Fortaleza,
Present.
thank you. Tim Woodard, not seeing online. Steve Belzak, not online. Lance Dahl, not seen online. Hoyt Jeter,
Here.
thank you. Sean Carlstrom,
Here.
thank you. Todd Sullivan, not seen online. Bill Mybush, I don't have online. Brian Horseman, not seeing online. Josh Mergens,
Here.
thank you. Trent Tinney, I don't see online. Michael Shaw, not online. Brett Conway is not online. Michael Barth is not online. Leah Summer,
Here, but I need to leave at 1:30 today.
gotcha. Thank you. Paul Clark,
Here.
thank you. And Andy Leonto. I don't see online. Let me check. I got one new person in the attendees column. Not a panelist. So we don't have quorum here. We're shy 2 seats of representation for the quorum.
Okay. So that allows us to jump right into, let's make some progress on the emergency shelters then.
Do we want to maybe let the folks in the attendees introduce if they want?
Absolutely. Go ahead and raise your hand if you'd like to be recognized, and we can pull you in. Go ahead, Aaron.
Hi, Aaron Scott here with Pallet Shelters.
Welcome.
Thank you.
And I see no other hands popping up there.
Okay.
All
And
right.
we'll see how this goes. We might be able to just pull everybody in.
I'm happy to do that. I mean, go ahead and promote everybody here so we don't have
Yeah.
to keep giving permissions to speak.
Is that okay, Brad? Are you comfortable being recognized here?
Looks like he's there, and then Take him
Okay.
is promoting as well. All right, so
Okay.
everybody's in the panelist section. And just a reminder to please wait until you're called on by chair to uh, start speaking. You can unmute if you like, and you can share video if you like. We had an incident I don't know if everybody's aware of in last week that was not pleasant to view or hear, so we're trying to mitigate that issue.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, everyone. So let's remember where we were a couple weeks ago on the temporary shelters. Seems to me we did adopt a baseline document, right? Is that correct?
Yes, yes, and that's posted here today. I didn't get it open or uploaded soon enough or very long before this meeting, but
Okay.
it has been posted on the IBC um, tag page for since the December 18th. So we've had it up there, and I haven't received any documents from any proponents
Okay.
suggesting modifications. So we adopted the Appendix P from California, and the modifications shown in that document just show any California specific language kind of shifted over to Washington specific language.
Okay, thank you. And do you mind putting that up? And then while we're talking
Yeah.
here, Dustin, could you please pull Ardell and type him in?
Yes.
Thank you. Go ahead, Josh. Were you going to say?
I was just going to say, Dustin, I do have some comments on that document, and I was not available at the meeting that we first sent that out. So sorry if I missed that. We should be sending those off, but I have them available for discussion, and they're small in number.
All right, let's no problem that you didn't get them to me. We can bring them up now, and then if we need to, we can post them out there for everybody to digest.
Would you prefer that, Josh? You just pull it right up?
Sure. You want me to pull it up on my screen, or is Dustin pulling up on his screen? So I didn't quite catch.
I'm pulling up the baseline document. If you have something showing your changes, I'm happy to let you share the screen there too.
Just some general questions. So maybe it'd be easiest just to keep yours up so we're not switching back and forth, and I can point out a couple of items if it's time to talk.
And just as we get into this, did anyone have different expectations for how we wanted to approach this today? Okay. Well, let's start and try to make progress then.
All right. Let me put some marks on my attendance sheet so I can look for new folks popping on here.
I'll watch you, Dustin. So,
Okay.
welcome, Ardell.
Okay. All right. So, we reviewed this document last time and decided to adopt it as our baseline document to start making modifications to. And as I mentioned just a second ago, I've got sections that are relevant to the California application crossed out. And in some places, I've replaced like the California building standards with the Washington building code.
Dustin, we're not seeing your screen if you're intending to,
Oh,
or I'm not at least.
no, I probably didn't press the share button. There we go. All right. So I got some strikeout and underline on this document already, really just removing the California relevant sections and in some places adding Washington stuff. So as far as the content of this appendix, there's really no change from what we reviewed at the last week. And I guess at this point, Josh, since you have some comments kind of ready in the canon already, I'd be happy to move to a section and we can discuss what you have kind of ready.
Perfect. We'll just kind of go in order here. First is in the definitions on page 2, where we have the declaration of shelter crisis. I see you had crossed out the California codes, which makes sense, but I'm just questioning and I don't know. So I'm raising the question if we have specific language in Washington RCWs or other code sections that declare what this declaration of shelter crisis is, or if this definition is really only applicable to the California codes. And I don't necessarily have an answer on that. I don't think there's a problem keeping it there, but I thought it'd be worth bringing up to the group to know if anyone's aware of any issues with that.
I feel like I recall discussion saying that this isn't something relevant to what we're trying to bring forward right now. I think the notion is that there is a shelter crisis all across the state at the moment, and we're trying to bring some relief there. But I'm not aware of any specific legislation or anything that would we could maybe point to in this section.
Okay, and part of my thought is I don't know if we use that exact term elsewhere in this document. So I don't know if we need the entire definition. We go on to talk about emergency declarations in general, but not this specific wording. Maybe I'm making too much of it. That's just a comment to throw out there that unless anyone else sees a issue, I think this whole definition can be removed from the Washington code.
Josh, I remember this also, and Ardell, I hate to put you in the spot, but we did talk about this, right? That it wasn't our intent to require that emergency has been declared. Is that correct? Or
I mean, we've been in a state of emergency on homelessness for 15 years, I think was
right.
so, or at least in our jurisdiction, we have like a standing declaration. So I would just put it under that. But I don't know that I agree. It's not used anywhere else, right? In the document.
It is not, but we do reference state of emergency elsewhere, and we reference local emergencies and other similar things. So I just don't know if we need that definition in there. Probably not the world's biggest comment. Happy to.
No, let's strike it for now, and we'll circle back if we realize a mistake.
Yeah, the one thing, this is Hoyt. I actually kind of like that in there. because when it says declaration of shelter crisis, the local building department here at the city of Tacoma, maybe it'll be local where we actually declare it for something. So it actually makes it to where um, it's kind of held to something in some kind of counter. I personally do not mind it in there. So
But Hoyt,
So
isn't it implying that you cannot do some sort of enforcement if not for that? Or I mean,
no, I don't think I'd imply that. I wouldn't read that into that. So it just says a declaration of shelter. It doesn't say a declaration of shelter by the state. It just says so we could possibly put that in a short-term declaration for XYZ reasons to create some quick housing and stuff. But if you wanted, I'm just telling you, I don't mind it in there, but I think we're reading too much in there where it has to be declaration by the state. I don't know why we can't do that as a jurisdiction also. So
I,
and
I did
Hoyt,
find it. Sorry, it is in 103.1. I apologize. It's just not written as declaration of shelter crisis, declaration of state of emergency, local emergency, or shelter crisis.
Thank you, Ardon. That's what I was just looking for as well. So to your point, Hoyt, it still has the language there. It's this specific definition that we're not referencing anywhere in the document. So not changing
That
anything to if they're declaring it.
I think it is declared there in 103.1. That's a different kind of declaration. There's three types of declarations: a state of emergency, a local emergency, or a declaration of shelter crisis.
correct.
But does it say the words declaration of shelter crisis in
It
here?
does it by saying declaration of state of emergency, comma, local emergency or shelter crisis. I think it's
So
that declaration is actually a modifier of all three of those.
That's how I
Um,
always read it. So
should they, okay, and I'm fine with that. It just seems to me like then we would either change the definition to match the language here, or we'd be italicizing these as definitions, but I don't think that's a big one. So I think it's best just to move on and leave it as is if others think it's good to be in there.
I don't love it because that's not a state of Washington thing. That's not defined in the state of Washington in any, to my knowledge. If somebody knows that, that'd be great, but it is a defined thing in California. So
And that's
I'm with you.
okay, cool.
Strike it. I'm fine striking it, but I would also strike it here.
can 103.1 just say declaration of emergency? Why do we say state of emergency, local emergency? Are those different things in Washington in jurisdictions?
it could be interpreted that way. I would be fine if it just said declaration of emergency. Um, I mean, if you strike it, I don't want to be the odd man out that's saying different, but I do like somehow it's declared. So we're using the emergency housing rather than actually being implied that it has to be, you can use emergency housing for anything. So I do like some kind of declaration of something, but I'm fine with declaration of emergency and just take out the state part. Because maybe the city of Tacoma, we have a declaration of emergency for XYZ reasons.
That's why it says local emergency. Both of those things are defined above.
And if you don't have any of this in, then the risk is that this can exist anywhere always. There's no way to enforce. Not, am I asking the right question?
Yeah. So if you don't have a local emergency declared or a state of emergency declared, what is your path to enforce this? Is that the question?
I think so.
Yeah. The way this was written, you would need one or the other.
That's correct.
But I think that the locals could amend it, right? If somebody felt like those two things needed to be declared and they still wanted to use it, they would need to have their mayor or their council declare something locally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you could do that. I agree with that. I believe that's good. Then I'm sorry, I don't want to take so much time on that.
No, I think it's important.
Yeah.
I think we're all trying to wrap our head around it, and whether I'm just curious if it belongs in the appendix, or is this something that is in section one, or should be in section one rather than in the appendix, but we're bundling it all together here.
So just so I'm clear, we're kind of discussing removal of these three definitions plus the changing it in 103.1. I'm hesitant to start crossing stuff out and say this is for sure what we're deciding because we don't have quorum here today, but totally thinking putting comments here on these sections. for digestion by the full group. But is that what we're talking about, is removing these sections or definitions, I mean?
Go
My
ahead,
Yeah.
Josh.
understanding is we would be removing the section we currently see on the screen, but leaving 103.1 alone, unless others had a different understanding, but I believe that's what we were proposing.
Okay. And just for everyone, we're a small enough group here today. Feel free to just kind of jump in, and if we have to get it under control later, we can do that. Okay.
Okay.
My only friendly amendment to that, Josh, would be to strike shelter crisis from 103.1 if you're removing this.
That's what I thought you implied. Yeah.
Okay, no, that makes sense. I misunderstood that earlier, but that makes
Leave the
perfect
two
sense.
emergencies. Yep.
I
Mhm.
thought we separately had shelter crisis, but you're right, that's not in there. So I think that I agree with you, Adele. I think that's perfect.
And so just remove state from this section right
No.
here,
Just shelter crisis.
just pull that out of here.
Yep. So state of emergency or local emergency, I guess is what we're saying, huh?
Hmm.
Yeah, that's perfect then. I'm now in agreement, which is I'm sometimes too much of an agreement, I think. Oh,
Okay.
Okay.
And so for these other two, local emergency and state of emergency, um, those would be maybe as defined locally, or so I guess looking at the section I crossed out because it's kind of an incomplete sentence there at that point.
Dustin, maybe that's something you can research a little. I don't know if that's within if there's comparable language like in another RCW
Okay.
for when the state declares an emergency formally.
That's a good idea. We'll just do a little offline research on best fit there. Okay. I think we're all in agreement though to keep those two and figure out their Washington definition.
All right. And as soon as you're done, Dustin, I can move to the next one here, and I'll try to keep them a little quicker.
All righty, ready.
All right, so on page 4, under 103.2, this existing building section, I think the intent is already covered. I'm just wondering if it's clear enough and tight enough that these existing buildings would still need to meet ADA, fire protection, etc. The way this reads, it says of the code when they were constructed. But later in this document, we have ADA requirements and occupancy load requirements. I think all do apply here. I was curious if the group thought we needed to change anything or if that's well enough codified throughout. I just didn't know if this could lead to some confusion. I think it could be as simple as saying with the existing codes and provisions and the regulations within this document. Curious what folks think, though. It might be best to leave it alone because I think there is a full code path to get there. I just see a lot of room for confusion or debate from folks submitting who are trying to push things through.
I'm fine with it as what I'm looking at. I'm okay with that.
And like I said, if no one else sees a concern with it, I think we can move on from that one. That was more of a question and maybe too much of a clarity thing. So I'm happy to move on from that one if folks have heard it and feel good about it.
My understanding of that was that the existing buildings in there would allow for, well, the use of existing buildings. There may not be time to update for fire for various things if it's a one weekend of very cold weather and they need to get people inside for one weekend.
And maybe that's the intent that needs to be clarified because I wasn't sure if that was the intention of it. I don't know if our intent is to say any existing building, as long as it was permitted at that time, does not need to meet any requirements within this document. Unless that is what we're trying to say, which I would raise a little bit of a flag of. I think we still need to have the appropriate number of restrooms. We still need to have the right number of square footage per person. And if you look under this 103.3, that's occupant load. That's not under this existing building. So it seems to be that existing buildings is separate from necessarily occupant load. I don't think that's the intent, but maybe if it is the intent, then we might need to change it. But I don't think the intent of existing buildings was that any building that was permitted from 1964 or whatever is automatically good to go in all cases.
Yeah, that's good.
But isn't that in 2.1?
Well, that's new additions, alterations, or change of occupancy, but I don't know if we're necessarily changing occupancy, because I'm not aware of a specific occupancy that is emergency housing, but very open to having somebody who's more involved in this area of the code tell me I'm mistaken, because this is less my ballpark of the code. I'm the structural guy. I'm more chapter 16 forward.
Well, I believe it was if you had another building with a different occupancy classification, you could still use it for this system.
Certainly, and I agree with that. So I guess I just want to make sure that there's a trigger that is enforcing this occupant load, because right now it just says existing buildings can be used if they were meeting all the regulations at that time. So it wouldn't necessarily, if I'm reading it right, pull in anything regarding now being an emergency shelter.
Right. I thought 103.3 will get you there.
I think that's the intent, and if everyone else feels good about it, I can totally let this one go. I just didn't know if it was clear enough. It sounds like, Adam, is that a different interpretation that you had, or were you under the understanding that 103.3 would be in effect? Maybe
this is the way I would read it if this came in. So, and I get that. I kind of agree with you. This is a little confusing. Like this, there's nothing that says, am I establishing a change of occupancy, or is there an existing occupancy that is allowed to remain? Right? Like, do these just layer onto, nope, here's my emergency provisions or emergency shelter provisions. And for during that state of emergency, these are the requirements of the building. Do I actually have to do a change of occupancy, right? To have them move in. I think that's the new additions alteration. So it's like saying, it's kind of like existing building code language, right? Like new meets new. Like if I'm doing an addition, just comply. Like there is no emergency shelter occupancy within the code right now, but there is R1 transient. And that's what it's most akin to, I think, under existing provisions. And what we would use for what we use for permanent shelters.
That makes really good sense. So just to throw out a scenario, say a church is going to temporarily use their facility as an emergency structure. It's certainly not occupancy R1, and no one's expecting them to do a change of occupancy.
Right. So we have guidance that says we will accept it as an emergency shelter without requiring the change of occupancy for certain types, for certain size shelters. Like that's how we approach it. But that I think is a fair question, is when does change of occupancy trigger? And that new additions and alterations, that's new meets new, but for what? Is it for our occupancy, or is it for the existing established occupancy? So I think that might need more exploration on what that language could be to clarify that, Josh.
Should we take a note for now of this, move to the other comments, and this is something that we can come back to when we have quorum, or what was the group thinking?
If you have language either now or offline, I mean, let's just move forward like that. If that's,
I don't have effective language right now. Okay. I'd be happy to put something together as a jumping off point, though.
Okay, let's flag it if it sounds like we want some thought on it.
I think it's even just saying, Josh, change of occupancy provisions do not apply. Like, it's a striking change of occupancy from this section.
Sure. And then the one other part I'm wondering is this connected enough that, say, the occupant load 103.3 applies to existing buildings? When it says existing buildings work if they apply to the code at that time, it doesn't have any reference to this set of provisions, which again, I'm being a little persnickety, but I want to make sure it's not confused down the road as some kind of loophole.
It's not to me, but
Can you help me understand it, Hoyt? Because maybe I'm just misunderstanding. I'd be interested to
well,
know.
yeah, the way I look at it, you're taking an existing building. You still don't skip 103.3. You still have some provisions you have to meet in that too. Um, you go down the sections to see how it applies because you're still in chapter one. I'm not seeing how you're skipping 103.3 that's shown there just because 103.2.1 of what you said. So
Yeah, I kind of see what you're saying. So if you said in 103.2, Josh,
Mhm.
shall comply with the building code provisions in effect at the time of the original construction and the provisions of this code of this appendix, right? Like that,
Yeah,
I think covers it for you.
that's exactly the kind of language I'm looking for.
Hmm.
Um,
It would be in the scoping of 103 too.
yeah, I think we just need to include that because right now it doesn't say you have to follow any of this. It just says existing buildings only need to do
Yep.
provisions at the time of their construction, which I don't think is the intent at all. And probably not how it'll be interpreted most of the time, but if there's no objections to that sentence, I think that would be useful to put in there. And again, I can follow back up with some
yeah,
type of
that yeah, that would work. It would work for me too. Exactly what Ardell said. So
perfect.
So you're
I
basically
think
saying like, I'm not allowing a non-permitted building to continue, right? If this was
exactly. Yeah.
unsafe and I'm moving in with my shelter, like this had to be permitted and compliant with something at some time and have a, um, we've had some with like illegal lofts and stuff like that, right? Where we're just like, well, that was never permitted. You can't have that, but you can have this floor. And yeah.
Perfect. Thank you guys for the conversation. Um, or if we're good to move on, I have a comment on page 5, 104.1. So it says emergency sleeping cabin shall have an interior floor area not less than 70 square feet, which is fine. But if you go up to 103.3 on the previous page, it has exceptions where if there's only, or if there's more than one occupant, there's 50 after. Where did it go? Sorry, you guys, just a second.
I think it's that last sentence under what you're talking, where more than one person occupied the building. The required area shall be increased at a rate of 50 square feet for each occupant in excess of one. Is that what you're talking about?
I believe so. Sorry, I am now trying to remember this one going back to it. I wish I was a little more prepared. But yeah, it says 70 square feet where more than one person is 50 square feet, and 103.3, it had 53 square feet as a reduction for sleeping cabins. Oh, here it is. In the exceptions of 103.3. Including emergency sleeping cabins, the minimum interior floor area may be reduced to 53 square feet if the enforcing agency determines 53 square feet is acceptable for a single occupancy sleeping unit. But then in 104.1, we say the 70. So yes, thank you, Hoyt, for helping me find that again. Does anyone feel a concern there, or is that exception with jurisdiction approval override 104.1 via 103.3 exceptions?
I would
Yeah.
have looked at that as more specific language to the cabins.
But it does say, if you, in the exception, it specifically says cabins,
Is
including
it?
emergency
Oh,
sleeping
okay.
cabins.
Yeah,
And
why
maybe
is that in there?
Yeah.
See, that's why maybe it's just that, including emergency sleeping cabins, that should be taken out, and then I think it flows correctly.
Yeah, possibly, or shifted to the sleeping cabins section.
It'd be great to know
From
what that is, though. Sorry, I
from
apologize.
from my understanding, that comes from like construction efficiency, right? If you have two 4x8 sheets of plywood as your floor, that gets you what, 64 square feet. You then stick 2x4 walls on top of that. You come up with about 53 square feet of interior space. So that allows for construction efficiency of smaller cabins and saving jurisdictions cost when purchasing these cabins.
So maybe it makes sense to include an exception in sleeping cabins or link these two together. It just seems like we're saying two different things. Because I see what you're saying, Aaron. That makes good sense um, to have that as an option, especially when we have the tag of with approval. I think that's a fine thing to do. And maybe we just need to massage that language to say it, but right now it seems to be in conflict.
It just seems like an afterthought that this very specific thing comes in and it should just be 53 square feet or 50 square feet in sleeping cabins then, if that's acceptable.
I've never had any of this small, I'll be honest.
It's pretty small.
Has anybody seen these?
No.
I have not seen them 53 square foot. We do have 64 square foot cabins that we sell, and they are a very popular selling item throughout the country, which is less than 70, but we don't use 4x8 sheets of plywood, so we build around efficiencies for our materials. I could see that being built around efficiencies for standard wood product materials.
Dustin, sorry to interrupt. Can you please pull Micah in?
Oh,
Aaron, what was the size again?
Our smallest cabins we sell are 64 square foot, which is based around efficiencies on our end for shipping. So I think that 53 comes from just that efficiency of using standard 4x8 sheets of plywood.
Yeah. I mean, we also could just propose to strike it.
I kind of like that the jurisdictions have the option to go lower should they choose, have a standard at 70 to keep people from doing anything too small, but then a jurisdiction can decide severity of the emergency, availability of temporary sleeping cabins, and make those decisions.
Okay. Sean, go ahead. We're just kind of
Yeah.
doing free flow today, but and then can we pull Ken in too, please?
Okay.
yes.
Well, for me, I would like to see the 53 square feet removed, especially in an emergency situation. If you have a 8 foot by 8 foot area, I could see where 2 bunk beds would fit in that area along 2 opposing walls, and you'd be able to house 4 people in that area.
Well, I mean, there obviously needs to be some logic behind this. And if Aaron, and others, you have product that is 64 and it's defensible, like obviously you want the flexibility. And someone clearly asked for 53.
Yeah.
At some point.
I think this should be approved at the local level
Okay.
and just leave it at that. The local building official and the fire marshal are going to be inspecting these areas and approving these.
So then can someone help me understand then why is this in this section it says for emergency housing, including cabins, and it's not just in the cabin section? What's emergency housing? How would that be different?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
My understanding, and I'm trying to double check on the fly here, is the sleeping cabins are not for, they don't have restrooms and things included. They are just to sleep in, and they would have to have auxiliary facilities, whereas emergency shelter would have those facilities, but emergency housing rather. But I would need to double check that, but that is my current understanding. Well, actually, the definition of emergency housing includes emergency sleeping cabins. So that actually muddies it up a little bit more. Maybe this is one that we keep flagged and we circle back with quorum with some proposed language. But it seems like we've kind of uncovered a couple more areas where that could be cleaned up and tightened up to get to the same effect without confusion.
Okay, thanks. Dustin, as we're monitoring here, is Brett Conway, does he want to come in?
Yeah, I've sent the invite and he's on our tag as well, so
I
we're
see
one
they have
seat
to.
closer.
Oh, so they have to click on accepting it as a
Yeah,
panelist.
so I send the hey, please join as a panelist, and then they have to accept it, and
Well,
they
then I will stop reminding you. Thank you. Okay, did we if you strike including emergency sleeping cabins here, what does that mean? How is that? And then just put the 53 square feet in the 104.
To me, it's all about clarity. I like putting the 53 and 104, but we may also want to revisit the definition of emergency housing, because emergency housing includes emergency sleeping cabins. So I think it technically is all there and makes good enough sense. It just is presented in a way that I could see being confused or misenforced. But I don't have a specific answer now because now I'm seeing these definitions cross over each other, and I would have to spend a little more time with that because I hadn't caught that before.
Okay. Well, let's keep moving and remember this one. I agree. Maybe it'll come to us.
Okay, next couple are a little more straightforward. Let me scroll back here on page 5, provision 104.2, where it discusses snow loads. This just seems very California based. It's saying where snow loads are greater than 20 pounds per square foot. One, we don't specify ground or roof snow. I suggest we specify flat roof snow. And Washington also typically has a minimum snow of 25 pounds per square foot. So I think we should say where snow loads are greater than, where flat roof snow loads are greater than 25 pounds per square foot, and the roof shall be designed and constructed to resist these additional loads. Or we can just say snow load shall be in accordance with Washington State Building Code as a potential option as well, but I don't see anything wrong with having it here. It just seems like that was more geared towards California.
I have a
Go ahead,
question for
Ardell.
Aaron. We have not
Yes.
required submittal of these for the pellet shelters used for cabins for us, for our jurisdiction. Again, under the pellet shelters or tiny home villages for us, or the tiny homes we've been treating them like fancy tents. But
Mhm.
the I do your products like, sorry, let me restate this. I think that these are good to have the live load requirements here. I think that some of our providers, like if Habitat for Humanity is designing these and providing them, like I've never run a calc on these to demonstrate that they meet these loadings. Their standard stick frame construction would meet it, right? Like I'm not worried about that though. I don't know.
Mhm.
Do you have engineered calcs for pallet shelters for yours that would demonstrate compliance with these loadings?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
We've gone through testing and calculations. We use some fairly non-conventional materials, so it relies a little more on testing than values out of, say, the NDS or something like that.
And
Um,
I remember that challenge, I think, on one of the communal structures on our site. And so I
yeah.
don't know necessarily need to um, push it here, but I think that for when you're doing alternative materials, other jurisdictions are going to have a hard time accepting testing
Yeah,
and that it
that's
needs
a
to meet.
continual challenge.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so just wanted to throw that out there.
That's the challenge of innovative new
Yeah.
materials. It takes a long time for things to become accepted.
So Aaron, I'm
Generally,
curious.
jurisdictions have looked at testing or ran some of their own testing or realized that they're only up for, a year or something, and they're staffed 24 hours a day with people that can actually clear the roof or something like that.
Um,
Yeah.
one thing thinking about this for these emergency sleeping cabins, and I know this, I'm just using it just for these emergency stuff. What would be nice to have in there, which I haven't been able to find, I was going to bring this up later, but we're specking out what kind of loads there are. A lot of times we spec out when the occupant load of an assembly space, we have to post a sign and stuff. Is it possible for these things where emergency sleeping cabins shall be designed to resist winds and support the following live loads and shall be posted with the sleeping cabins? If it's a little easy sign that actually tells it, any jurisdiction that where things are going to exceed that, they may use it for a temporary time, like maybe over the summer, then they say, hey, it has to be moved, but at least it's somehow posted what the loads are for these. I'm assuming a lot of these are going to be pre-manufactured somewhere else that is going to come in and just be placed because there'll be a lot of them that'll be needed. And they're not always going to be built. Correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, I've seen that in other places. I saw it in Turkey where a bunch of stuff just got shipped and just put down on the ground. And then seems like a simple thing for that. If you post it, then at least we know what the loads are. Um, and then you can also make decisions on these emergency shelters if you're in a certain area where, well, those loads aren't going to be here. We could have it longer than a certain time. Um,
Mhm.
that's what I'm thinking. Instead of this thing, there's similar greater than 20 pounds, just leave the 1, 2, and 3 and just say these loads shall be posted posted with the emergency shelter or something. What do you guys think about that? I'm just thinking out loud here.
I mean, so that's a possibility, certainly. With the sleeping cabins, so things that go through the factory assembled structures program through L&I are required to have all of those posted on there. But so many of like our cabins, and I know a lot of other ones that are made are semi-manufactured in the factory and then final assembly on site, fully inspectable on site. So there's nothing that an inspector has to come to the factory to see, which generally pushes us out of the purview of L&I for these, and into typical permitting as a site-built building. So we typically send in calculations for typical permitting like you would any other building. It certainly wouldn't be a bad idea to have these capacities stickered onto the shelters. Certainly not a bad idea.
I have a couple thoughts to throw out there. Based on the conversation we're having, would it be a good idea to, particularly in the snow one, specifically state that the jurisdiction can, waive that requirement, or with jurisdiction approval, lower snow load may be used. So for like your example, Hoyt, in the summer, it doesn't really make any sense to have these designed for snow, and we might be impeding people's ability to do this. However, if in Spokane there's a cold weather event that we want to put it in, you may get snow loads that are certainly exceeding what they're designed for. And unless we're saying people have to brush them off, maybe that's a local jurisdiction can make that decision that they're being shoveled or somehow being monitored. But maybe we should give some of that power to the local jurisdiction. And unless specified otherwise, we have this language, but that can allow them to make informed decisions. Does anyone have any thoughts on that?
Well, I'm all
Isn't
for
there
giving
something
some
up
power to
front?
local jurisdictions.
Sorry.
Is there something
I'm
up front,
sorry,
Ardell? If there
Is
is,
there
then that,
sort of a global, like, for all of these things, that the building official has the ability to provide flexibility on strict, like, I don't know if there's sort of, like, I agree with you, and I think but we'd be repeating that on all of these, right? So is there something that's in one of the earlier, or is there language? There's certainly language just in the building code overall that allows the building official flexibility, but is that something that's worth repeating?
so I have a couple thoughts. One, I'm a little uncomfortable with the idea of saying any provision can be decided by the building department, because then what is this document? The other thought is IBC does have section 104.1 that says building official is allowed to render interpretations, but you're not allowed to reduce the code requirements. In this case, we're talking about reduction of code requirements. So that's why I think it might be worthwhile to have something specific in here. And I think there are other locations in this document where they say that the enforcing agency is allowed to affect certain portions of it. I see language like if allowed by enforcing agency throughout here a little bit. If others feel differently, I'm very open. I would be nervous to say any and all of these provisions are optional to follow at the building department's request or at their decision, but maybe in an emergency situation that's appropriate. One other thought that came to mind with respect to snow load is we may want to be careful with the number we select, because when we adopt new codes in November, we're going to LRFD snow loadings, which present different. So we may want to specify ASDs, flat roof snow load, but we can get to that specific language later. But just one other thing to throw out on the record. Does anyone else have any thoughts about putting unless otherwise approved by the enforcing jurisdiction or whatever that language is they used elsewhere in here. I'm trying to find the exact words, but giving them an out on the snow load, at least as far as this conversation, maybe we need a broader discussion for other provisions or provisions as a.
I mean, I think it seems appropriate in this situation. I completely understand what you're saying about making that a full blanket statement about everything. But there are certainly times when jurisdictions know that they're not going to be using it in that type of situation. Some places, you know, when it gets even really cold, they'll take people out of shelters and put them into something else, you know, that is more heated and more secure for a, say, negative 20 degrees or something like that. But giving that option, it also helps reduce purchase cost. If designs can be whittled down a little bit for their particular use, it reduces the cost burden on them and allows them to purchase more shelters, get more people under a roof.
Yeah, makes
I
perfect
I
sense.
just want to, Dustin, I want to play devil's advocate. I'm one of these people that says the code already allows where you just typed in unless otherwise approved by local jurisdiction, right, in the snow load. Because I've had experience where if you don't have that, they do the opposite. So I think the code already allows this, and starting to put it into the code, certain places where you can change it. I'm not a big fan of that. Just my personal.
Wait,
If you know, yeah.
sorry, go ahead. I thought you were done. Go ahead, finish your thought. My mistake.
I was just gonna say, then just don't put it in there. I just don't think, you know, that's just my experience for how long I've been doing this. So I
So
just don't like.
sorry. Okay, can you cite anywhere in the code that says that a jurisdiction is allowed to reduce requirements?
Yeah, where it says unless approved by the building official in chapter 1, at the very beginning of the code.
But what about section 104 where it says they're not allowed to reduce any requirements in the code and it has to meet the intent of the code?
Okay, that's the part, the intent of the code. So they can make the interpretation that that's the intent of the code for life safety. So,
But they can't go below specified minimums, correct? I believe that's specific language in section 104.1.
I'm just going to put it out there that that's also
Yeah.
interpretable.
Yeah, it is interpretable. Yeah, I think.
I guess if that's how it's being enforced, that's fine. I ethically disagree with that interpretation, and I encourage people not to do it that way as a personal opinion. But I don't think we need to get too hung up on the specific one because I think people are kind of doing this anyways. But it's an issue I have with building departments where they invent rules that are kind of loose interpretations or to reduce requirements. That's a concern to me. But
well, let me give you an example. I'll give you an example that we have done. We've had canopies put up, right? And we required here in Tacoma, those are required to be taken down, and we give a date when they take it down because they're not going to have snow load on. And so these canopies are for restaurants that are going out where they're putting it up so they can have outdoor seating. We really had that during the COVID. So those canopies were not designed for the 25 pounds per square foot that we have here in Tacoma. But they were designed for the wind and all that stuff. Well, the code says you got to design for a live load, 25 pounds per square foot for snow load, but they were taken down before the snow would even get here. So that's an example where it's designed for less than the live load, okay, because it wasn't even going to be put up during that time. So there are times when that does happen. Where,
isn't all of that issue with COVID what's really spurring this legislation and trying to get something specific in here because there weren't rules to follow before?
Yes.
So I think that's an example of a situation where we didn't have any language, so there was nothing to go against. And I would argue that is within the intent of the code because there is no snow. It's not a permanent structure. I get hung up on the sentence that under 104.1 where it says such policies and procedures shall not have the effect of waiving requirements specifically provided in this code. And all I would propose is we allow you guys to do it here. I don't think that blanket statement applies. I'm not an expert in code language, but that's my opinion. I will stop repeating it so we can move along.
Okay. Is there anything to resolve here then? Well, let's keep moving. I didn't know we resolved
I
it, but
guess
let's,
so.
yeah.
It's
Um,
not, it never hurts to say unless otherwise approved. I mean, that's the thing. It's like, I'm straight out neutral on that. I have an opinion that Josh and I can hash out in another conversation around the what is equivalent and what is
Mm.
providing a minimum level of safety around 104, but that's not, so does it hurt to add that language on unless otherwise approved? No. Hoyt is expressing a concern. It's like, well, then where else do I have to state it, right? If I have it stated in 104. I agree with the 25 PSF and a change to make it consistent to match Washington minimum loading.
Yeah, in my
I'm also not a
experience
voting
with
member.
in my experience with dealing with building officials, I've never heard that interpretation of the 104.11 to allow any sort of reduction in capacity. It's always been equivalent or better. So that exact example of canopies for restaurants during the summer, um, I've never heard an interpretation when talking with an official that would have allowed that. It would have required that the snow lowered or better.
Okay.
The interpretation is the equivalent. I'll just put it out there.
Mm.
Okay. What is the equivalent? And that is a judgment call by the building official.
Okay. Well, everyone, we've actually reached time. It went quickly. So, I think this is as far as we get. Now let's just skim down. What do we, we keep saying this, we want to, keep moving. What do we need to do offline to
I just have a
prepare?
question.
Yeah.
Has it been put out that you're looking for amendments? Like, is that sorry, I didn't realize like you're looking for code change proposals from the public to Appendix P. Is that where we're at right now?
It's a good point. We haven't formally put out a window. So I guess if you're not inside baseball following this and we've posted this now and made this document available, it's a good question. How does everyone feel about that?
I think just like with all the rest of our stuff, getting public input helps us drive the process forward. And so we can advertise that we're looking for input there. But this document we have here was just created the last time we spoke on temporary emergency shelters. And, my thought was we would kind of approve the changes to remove the California references and kind of get it orientated towards Washington specific references and then really start digging down into the meat. And so, we didn't have quorum today to really approve any of these changes to it. But we can definitely advertise that. And I think it would be helpful to get, differing perspectives, not people just from the tag, providing input on the content that's coming forward.
Is that what you're recommending, Ardell and others? Let's get this baseline
Yeah.
established and then get it published and put it out there.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's what I would like to.
I think that
As
makes
fast
great
as
sense.
possible.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
like it wasn't clear to me, Todd, if like the tag is going to talk about emergency sleeping cabins and then put it out there and say, hey, is there any other code change proposals? Like if
Yep.
I don't know.
No, it's the right question and technically now we will have time. So I think it's let's do it that way. So what I'm hearing is that we've made progress, but we can't approve. We didn't finish and can't approve this as the baseline that we want to release to but we're going to post it anyway and people can obviously contribute for next time.
Yeah. And this
And
will
then we'll
still
open a
remain,
window after next time, assuming we have quorum.
yeah.
Okay.
And it'll remain the R1 document because all I've done in here is, add comments to it.
Okay.
So,
But it is posted, right?
the one we started with today is posted, and then I'll get this updated with the new comments in that IBC.
On the IBC
Yes.
meeting. Okay.
And Dustin, can I just send 2 last comments to you via email that can be added as loose comments here for our discussion next time?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much.
Dustin,
Okay.
is that, can you please post as a Word document? I'm not seeing it.
It should be up there as
Is it?
Word right now. Let me double check, and it's entirely possible I've made a mistake. So it should be on the International Building
Oh,
Code
there.
Temporary
Okay.
Emergency Shelters page. You find that here. And then here in we have the Word and the PDF there.
I got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Progress. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks everybody for
Thank you.
attending.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you
Yeah,
all.
everyone have a
Thank
good rest of
you.
the day.
We're adjourned.
Bye.
You too. Cheers.